Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Music to Compose You podcast. I'm Margaret Wacyk, and today we're taking a bit of a break from our foray through the Beethoven Appassionata Sonata, but I've got something really special to share with you, and it's an interview with my friend and piano tuner, Marc Wienert. If you've ever wondered about piano tuning, why piano tuning is important, why people get into this profession, and the deeper secrets that lie within, then Marc Wiener is the go-to person. He makes it an art, a philosophy, a way of life, and it really goes beyond what we think. And so much so that there was a New York Times bestselling book written about this man. And it's not often that one finds a book written about a piano tuner and pianos in general, and it's a real page turner. I highly recommend this book, Grand Obsession by Perry Nyes. When I read it back in 2008, I took notes and it struck such a chord, no pun intended, with me. And I thought, gosh, to have such a intriguing person with such an amazing approach that was a spiritual, metaphysical approach to piano tuning reminded me of reading about Pythagoras. I said, I can't believe that there's a person like this that exists. And when I finally got the opportunity to have Marc come and tune my piano, well, we became fast friends. And so you'll find this amazing conversation that we go into a lot of rabbit holes. In part one of these two parts, you'll hear about meeting Marc, what is behind his intent to start piano tuning, how did he fall into this profession, and what he brings to the table. And if you listen to episode 1 of this podcast, you heard about my magical piano and what makes it magical. Well, it's Marc. And we're going to go into that. And I think you'll have a lot of fun. Even if you're not interested in pianos, I guarantee you this episode will have something in it for everybody.
Welcome to Music to Compose You, where the timeless melodies of classical music intertwine with narratives of personal transformation. Join me each week at my Steinway piano on a journey through the symphonies of life. We explore how the power of music shapes our stories, ignites our passions, and leads us towards profound inner growth and physical healing. From the gentle cascades of a Bach prelude to the triumphant crescendo of a Beethoven sonata, each episode will resonate with the melodies of our experiences, inviting you to discover the transformative magic of classical music. Thanks, Marc, for being on the podcast. And we've known each other for almost 10 years now. And it's been such a fun journey exploring the world of pianos and sound and frequencies and all this stuff. And well, let's just start with the question how you came to become a piano tuner.
Okay, that's easier. I was studying film scoring at Berklee College of Music, and it was costing a lot of money, and my student loans were skyrocketing, and I realized it was an unsustainable venture, and I was confused in my life and uncertain what to do. And my mother suggested, Marc, why don't you look into piano tuning? It keeps you in the music space, but gives you a way of earning a living. So
wise words.
Happens to be that in Boston, one of the best piano tuning schools available was there, and I was able to. I withdrew from Berklee and tried to enter into the course study of piano tuning, and it was very near the beginning of the semester, and they hemmed and hawed, and I begged and begged. And they finally said, come in and take a test. And I took a test, and I guess I must have passed that test because they immediately enrolled me.
Hmm. Well, do you remember what kind of tests they asked?
Yes, it was very specific. They demonstrated unison tuning, and so there was one string that was remaining constant and a second string that they were moving. I guess with a tuning hammer, I should be clear to other people who are listening what that means. So somebody was turning a tuning pin and causing the second string to move relative to the first string that was remaining constant. And it was up to me as they went above and below that note that I would indicate when I heard them at the crossing point where the bow strings were in tune with each other. So
Wow.
on the way, if they were below, if the second string was below the note, they would raise it to be above the note. And I was to indicate what point did they pass the clean unison to end up above. And they would go above and below. And each time I was to indicate when the two notes were equal to each other.
Mhm.
Apparently, I was able to do that without difficulty.
Yeah. So now that you are teaching me how to tune, I see this as like such a new and exciting way to hear. How has that changed for you from that first test, hearing when something is clean and the unison is in tune versus now? Has this experience changed for you, evolved over time? And if so, how?
Are we talking specifically about unison tuning?
Yes.
Um,
And let's clarify for our listeners what unison tuning is.
okay. In the piano, some notes have multiple strings. So the hammer hits multiple strings simultaneously. And all three strings have to be the exact same note. So when you're tuning one string to another string to be exactly the same note, that's called a unison, as opposed to an interval, where you
Mhm.
might be tuning a string to be a third or a fourth away from the object string, let's say. And so unison is tuning two strings to be exactly the same pitch or hertz or vibrations per second, or frequency, or whatever word you want to use.
Mhm.
So unison tuning uh, um, has become, uh, well, I think this is the natural course of any evolution, has become simpler and easier for me.
Yeah.
And at the beginning of a piano tuning journey, it's typically one of the most difficult things.
Mhm. For sure. For sure. And, now having watched you tune over the years so many times, I'm always stunned and amazed that you can carry on conversations while tuning, that you've gotten to be so sensitive to those vibrations. And so obviously, you must be doing something more than hearing. Are you hearing or feeling the vibrations in your body? Like, how do you do that?
Well, I think chat and tune maybe is not really a central topic. I don't know of anyone else who does chat and tune. Okay. I've been given a gift, and the gift includes chat and tune.
That's insane. That's like that is so crazy. That's like juggling 1,200 things at one time. I can't even when the students I have always laugh at me because I might be saying something to them and then they start playing and then I I cannot talk while I hear playing, or when I play, I have those 2 channels are so on opposite ends of the spectrum in my brain. So they always laugh, like, because I just I go into only one channel, but you obviously could do this incredible thing that you operate on multiple channels and you always get it right. Let's, you know, let's just cut to how we met because it was sort of an interesting story. And I'm just going to give a little bit of my background. I think the year was about 2005 or 6 or something like that. I don't remember when the book came out, but the book was called Grand Obsession by Perry Nyes, and it was it was all the buzz in the musical community and outside of it. It became a New York Times bestseller, a novel actually about piano and the inner world of pianos and piano technicians and what goes into making a great piano. I read it and I loved it, and I was fascinated because you turn out to be kind of like the superhero at the end of the book. That I'm not going to give away how this book like ends, but that you brought the piano's original tone that the author fell in love with back. And I said to myself, wow, I really want to meet this guy. I would love to explore the journey of how to tune the piano to a different frequency. And I've talked about a little bit how we first went into that exploration of tuning the piano from the standard pitch of 440 to 444, which was, we were actually going between those two things, like, should it be 432? Should it be 444? We were really trying to find a more healthy, a more resonant way to approach the piano. And I asked so many different tuners, let's bring the piano up to 444. And everybody said it can't be done. But you came along and you said, yeah, let's do it. Where do you want to go with this? Which I thought was so incredible. Let's just talk a second for those people that are interested in, because there's a lot of talk in the musical community in the last few years, especially about working outside of the standard pitch of 440 and all the benefits of going up to 444. For those pianists and tuners out there that want to try this, what are the steps involved in doing that?
In raising the pitch of a piano from 440 to 444?
Yes.
Well, let me go back to something you said previously. I think it can't be done was inaccurate. I'm unwilling to do it would have been more accurate.
Okay.
Or perhaps I've never done it before, or I'm unable to do it. But unable to do it doesn't make sense because there's a tuning pin and a string attached to it, and you can turn that pin to your heart's content, up and down and up and down and up and down. And let's say it's an A for simplicity. You can go up to 450, you can go down to 420, you can do anything with that tuning pin. If you're going up, you will eventually find a point where the string may break.
Yeah.
Perhaps not widely known fact is that piano wire, it was determined by the great thinkers of the piano industry that piano wire sounds better when it's a certain percentage of the path towards its breaking point. So all piano wire is pulled tightly enough that it's fairly close to its breaking point.
Mm-hmm.
Now, strings break for other reasons, metal fatigue, so on and so forth, or deterioration at a termination point or whatever. But assuming that all of that is robust, then there's still a tension at a given speaking length at which the string will break. But going from 440 to 444 is hardly the break zone for modern piano wire. So there's no harm, no foul in raising an A from 440 to 444 in terms of any fear of string breakage. And then you just follow through like any normal tuning. You set the A and kaboom, you tune the rest of the piano. and maybe some tuners that are using an electronic tuning device, they may start on note number 1. They have the flexibility of doing that because they're not creating structure themselves. The machine's creating structure. But that number 1 note will take into consequence that they calibrated their tuning device for 444 instead of for 440. So it's just a question of follow through. You set your device or you set your A to 444 and you tune the piano like you've always done. So no mystery there. You just raise the pitch, lower the pitch. It's something that's very common. Often pianos are below 440. Let's say you enter a room and the piano's at 436. Well, raising 436 to 440 is hardly different than raising from 440 to 444 in terms of the mechanics of what you have to do in order to achieve that change.
Okay. But yet it seemed to be like I was asking for some huge thing. Is it because it requires multiple tunings to get the piano to set to that new?
Well, it would require multiple tunings to get the piano to stabilize. And depending on your skill with pitch raising, whether you're able to accurately anticipate how the final tuning is going to come out, then you may have to do multiple tunings to go from 440 to 444. And certainly if you wanted to achieve a high level of accuracy, you would need more than one tuning to do it.
Okay.
But other than that, again, the work of manipulating the physical matter so that the pitch goes up and down in the piano is work that's done all the time. Although rarely done, piano tuners are sometimes called upon to lower the pitch. Either way, lowering or raising is more work than doing a fine tuning where some notes are tuned slightly higher, some notes are tuned slightly lower in order to create an ideal alignment.
Now, this is really where the muffin breaks free from the pan, because there's one thing about tuning. There is a piano that is in tune, and then there is Marc Wienert's tuning, which is a whole other level of tuning. And I'm not the only person to say this.
This is a total embarrassment.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm going to embarrass you now.
Excuse me for interrupting.
Yeah, sorry.
Let me just say quickly, for all those other fellows in the tuning community, I don't have any special sauce.
Okay, but we're going to investigate. What is that sauce?
I don't have any magic tools that no one else has but me.
Yeah,
I'm operating in the same zero-sum game that Pythagoras established for all of us thousands of years ago.
Okay, but okay, you're modest, and I'm the one saying it. So your piano tunings are special, and I know this because I've been around pianos all my life. I've had a ton of different piano tuners, but when you tuned my piano, something magical happened. It's very hard to describe it. It was, well, to me, it felt like my world changed, and it was beyond the piano. It was, I could feel energetically a shift. Now, I know that we changed the tuning from the standard of a 440 and we went into a 444 at that point. But that beside that, it just was so beautiful. It was so pearlescent. And in the book, Grand Obsession, where you play a role in trying to restore the sound that the author fell in love with when she walked into this shop in New York City on 56th Street looking for her piano, or 58th Street, was it 58th Street, looking for her piano, fell in love with this deep sounding piano, which she named Marlena because it reminded her of the voice of Marlene Dietrich. She couldn't wait to get it home. And then once she did get it home, it didn't have the tone. And you at the end were the magician that brought the tone back. Now, your tuning has been described, and tuning was a big part of that.
Well, but voicing was the core issue.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so now describe what voicing
tragically discovered that tuning was also a necessary component for her to have the peak experience that she dubbed Marlena.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was a
So,
combination of the tuning
and the voicing.
and the voicing. Let's start first with the tuning.
And
So
444 had nothing to do with her
correct.
experience.
All right. But it was, would you say it was in the alignment in those ratios? Again, you mentioned that you're just doing what Pythagoras started,
Well, no,
right?
I just said that Pythagoras created the goalposts within which you have to operate. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you do something within those goalposts and within the establishment of those ratios that is, I don't know, it's like entering Alice's Wonderland. Like, it's a portal to something else. And with that, I know you're modest, but can you describe a little bit of what your journey has been like to get to that sensitivity towards those alignments, those intervals?
Well, uh, uh, I pay homage to two experiences in my life that were transformative. Number one, which is mentioned in the book, was the special chord that another piano tuner gave me, chord and arpeggio, that could be used to allow the piano to communicate to you what its requirements would be. However, that's a pure data stream, that chord, that has to be interpreted. So there's a subjectivity to the use of that chord. It's not an objective tool. And then the other experience was the opportunity to tune the same piano over and over again in a relatively short amount of time. I was hired to tune the same piano month after month for as long as I cared to. And of course, each time I went back, the piano was more in tune. I had a better starting point, let's say, than the previous tuning. So for me, that was an opportunity to reach for higher ground. I tried to do a better, quote unquote, better and better tuning each time. Now, maybe that has to be looked into to understand what those words mean, but let's just let them sit for now. Let me just say this. The culmination of that journey was that I realized that 90% in tune, yeah, pretty nice. 95% in tune, yeah, pretty nice. 97, 98% in tune, wow, really nice. But something magic happened between 98% in tune and 99.9% in tune that stunned me.
Wow.
And it was a career defining moment. Now, I will say, sadly, I'm rarely in a position to be exploring that high level of accuracy that I'm referring to. But it is there. Rarely has anyone heard it. And certainly you have benefited from it.
Yeah.
And setting aside, the absolute values of particular frequencies, the relativity, which is what we're discussing now, is achievable at a high level of accuracy. And that's when the real difference actually occurs. The reason most people don't think there's any difference in piano tuning is because they're comparing 90% to 92%.
Yes.
Well, there isn't much difference there. Compare 92% to 99%, and now you're going to hear something. Even if you don't know what you're hearing, you'll experience the difference, I personally believe. And that's what I feel like what I leave behind for people who may or may not understand what I've done. They will hear the purity of that alignment, to be elaborated on, and have an experience of good vibrational coherence, and it will be meaningful to them, just like it was meaningful to you.
I love what you say about that difference between 98% and 99.5%. And it's that it's when a person, I forgot who said this, but from another field, it's when you go, I think it was Tony Robbins who said, when you go from excellent to outstanding, it's now you're dealing with decimals. It's so small, the increments, but it's so hard to make a step upwards in that direction. You, as a former mountaineering man, have described it as when you get closer to the summit. You said it so beautifully back then. Do you recall what you were saying? Like getting
Well, I
closer.
said each step higher you are as you look back down gives you a completely new perspective that's unrecognizable from the previous.
That's great. Which is applicable. We're talking about this in this very specialized field of piano tuning, but that principle could be applied to any aspect of life. And some people call it the devil is in the details, but whatever it is, it's the higher ground that we're seeking. Whatever we do with that extra excellence, with that seeking towards the higher ground, it opens another door. And even in piano playing, in mastering a piece of music, it's always amazing that just when you think it's good, it's the most dangerous place to be, because we could settle, and we could settle at the 90% mark, where the real journey, the real good stuff is when you're getting towards the 98%, the 99.5. And this is where something else that's almost a portal to another world opens up as well, where suddenly there's so much more depth. And it's just a fascinating thing. Now, this is kind of a good pivot point to some of the great one-liners you make in the book. But one of the ones that has stuck with me throughout my life has been when you said that vibration is the brick and mortar of our universe. Can you tell us what that means from your perspective?
Okay, well, it's kind of a pretty smart ass comment, given, my background in the sciences is anecdotal at best. uh,
Hey, listen, I'm reading a book about Hedy Lamarr, who was not a scientist, and yet she discovered the frequency jumping that we use even as we're conducting this call on the internet. So I believe that as long, it doesn't matter what kind of degrees, but it's all about the connection and
well,
the heart and the passion for
well,
something.
tuning pianos is something that, I am hired typically to do for someone else. And usually the transaction is perceived, in that framework. But in actual fact, piano tuning has had its own really powerful impact on me.
Hmm.
Nothing to do with whether I'm paid or not, or a good piano or not, or anything.
Can you
The fact,
describe
the
what that
fact that,
is? What is the impact? What has it
well,
had
the
on you?
fact that I'm there with a vibrational system that allows me to iterate infinitely in terms of frequency alignments of various sorts, to use some common terminology, historic temperaments, for
Mhm,
example,
mhm,
or stretch coming from the piano tuning world, which comes from the need to accommodate impurities that are inherent in the piano as a musical instrument. But in
mhm,
any event, the system itself allows you to tune any note to any pitch you want. Um, so you have this territory that's completely malleable, allows you to do anything that you want. And then afterwards, you can listen to it and get feedback from the choices you've made. And so you have a feed forward feedback loop with the piano that is utterly subjective and personal. And I guess from a kind of a geeky standpoint, uh, that was a personal relationship that I explored vigorously, kind of as a added value to the transaction of give me money, I will tune your piano. So
Mhm.
I walked away with a special prize behind door number 3 or whatever that nobody was really aware of, that I walked away with every time I left someone's home or walked away from the piano.
Your attitude towards tuning is game changing. And I remember before I met you, I was getting very desperate because the piano tuner I'd been using to that point, who, like you, was Steinway trained and all that stuff, but he lost the interest and he was almost at the point of retirement. Now, totally understandable because when one goes to tune a piano, there are how many pins in a piano
There's
to tune?
over 200.
Over
So there's
200.
88 notes, but again, many of the notes have multiple strings.
S-
So in a system where you had one string per note, then you would have 88 tuning pins.
Right.
But in the piano, the modern piano, there's there is a section where there's only one string per note, but there's multiple notes that have either 2 strings or 3 strings.
So over 200 times for one tuning, the tuner has to engage with each of those 200 pins probably more than one time if you're really
Right, well,
doing
you're
a fine
making
tuning.
micro moves up and down.
Yeah.
So typically you would make multiple moves on each tuning pin, which means multiple decisions. So you're making thousands of decisions in a short period of time to tune a piano.
It's amazing. So you're doing the same thing, and then if you have what's a typical amount of pianos that a tuner does a day? I mean, you were doing a ton when you were working at
Well,
Manhattan School of
most
Music, right?
people think that 4 tunings a day is the standard for a professional piano tuner.
And so when you were working, at your most, how many pianos were you tuning a day?
Look, everybody's got the I caught a fish this big, or it was no, it was that big, or whatever. So I'm a little uncomfortable with this. Let's just say I've tuned many more pianos than what's considered the professional standard in one day.
The point being that it could become, I would say, monotonous. You're doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. How and
Well,
so
may I stop you right there? You're never doing the same thing over and over again, even though it appears that way.
Yeah. No, it's I totally get it. But this is why when the piano tuner that was ready to retire, he kept saying, "I just can't wait to retire. I can't do this anymore. I'm done." And yet your attitude when you first walked in the door, I remember the date and we celebrated the two of us because it was the day my world changed, June 3rd, 2015. And your attitude was like a kid in a sandbox. It was like, "Oh my god, this is so much fun. Let's explore." And you've never lost that. Each piano is a total joy and an exploration. So, your attitude is number 1, but let's just circle back to something you said about the subjectivity. Because when you're tuning a piano, I've learned having all the gazmos and gadgets and stuff that I could measure all I want to check if I'm in tune or not in tune. And I really rely on that measurement to give me confidence that I'm going in the right direction. However, I've come to realize very quickly that that tells me very little because I'm trying to get somewhere, but this machine is not getting me there. And there is that subjective quality because you're saying that when you go to tune a piano, you have an open field of play. And yet you're relying on an assessment, a feeling about what you're doing. What is the measurement? And it's far more than numbers. It's something that we've talked about. And you mentioned something about having an archetype, something that when you give lectures about what you do, you mentioned the archetype. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, you glossed over 5 or 6 pretty cool questions to kind of plumb down on
Okay,
archetypes.
you can
I will answer
drill
the
them.
last question first.
Okay.
Uh, when I say archetype, and I'm going to rank a lot of piano brands, when you hear a piano in your mind, it's a Steinway. Why is that? Because basically Steinway has owned the concert stage for 140, 150 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, and also recording. So the bulk of pianos you've heard have all been Steinways. So your inner archetype, the sound you hear when you imagine a piano, is typically a sound that one could attribute, if you were savvy enough, to the Steinway space, if you will. Now, not all Steinways sound the same. Some people might hate the way a particular Steinway sounds, or might adore another, or think it's the best piano they've ever heard. And any piano can be the best or worst you've ever heard.
If you're a piano learner of any age or level and feel blocked in your playing, I have some good news for you. Do you get tired of hitting the same notes over and over again? Does your progress feel stagnant no matter how much you practice? Worse yet, do you feel disconnected to the music you're playing and starting to feel tension creep up your forearms, hands, and shoulders? For many piano players, poor technique and tension can hold them back from reaching their full potential. But fear not, because there is a solution. Introducing the Golden Tone Technique, the revolutionary program designed to unlock your true potential and transform your playing. You'll learn proven techniques to release tension in your body, allowing you to play with greater ease and fluidity. The Golden Tone Technique is an integrated body, mind, and spirit approach to piano playing based on archived methods from the 19th century. On a personal note, I'm a classical pianist, and my road to Carnegie Hall was far from simple. Because of tendinitis, at age 19, I had to stop playing completely. I thought I would never fulfill my dream of becoming a concert pianist until I discovered an archive method and approach from the past that was based on the power of piano tone. When I learned this secret, it released all the tension in my body and allowed me to express myself in a way that I hadn't known possible. It was the ticket to true pianistic freedom. A big problem in modern piano playing methods, the kind usually popular on YouTube, is that they follow a more is more approach. Whether it's the promise of learning 10 songs in 1 week or racing to play scales as fast as possible, they miss one crucial part of the puzzle. When you know this secret, it unlocks a world of joy at the piano, where you connect to each and every note, playing with a newfound ease, accuracy, confidence, and creativity. Try it right now with a 3-part free video training on musictocomposeyou.com/goldentone. Here's some testimonials from people that have watched this free training. Mick from Australia said, "I can't describe in words what I got out of these videos. In fact, it was like a blockage was released. It was so special to me." Joel from South Carolina said after watching, quote, "I started playing better almost immediately. I highly recommend this." Rodney from Washington said, "Margaret's enthusiasm, passion, and knowledge provided me with new musical skills I thought I would never achieve." Break through to the next dimension of your piano playing, no matter what level you are at, and have dream experiences at the instrument every single time you touch a piano key. To experience it today, watch the free 3-part training on musictocomposeyou.com/goldentone. Thanks so much for joining, and I hope you tune in next week for part 2
of my conversation with piano tuner extraordinaire Marc Wienert, where we'll dive in even further to what it means to live life on that high resolution level where excellence is not enough, and it's about going to that 98 to 99.8% zone of accomplishment. Stay tuned and have a great week.